In his article, What Does a Global Brain Look Like?, Trent Salvaggio, who's the executive director of the IoT Talent Consortium, discussed the idea of the global brain.
The global brain.
The global brain.
Doesn't that sound like a 50s horror movie?
Well, and actually, it reminds me of some movies I used to watch. Colossus, The Forbin Project.
That's right.
Yeah, remember that? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Well, the global brain actually, strangely enough, does relate to that. It's a term used by futurist Gerd Leonard to describe a world where computer systems around the world are connected, as are all of their inputs. So IoT devices, for instance. So if you can imagine, you have a computer system, it's got all these inputs, real world inputs, IoT devices going into it, and all of these computer systems are interconnected and communicating with each other. So kind of a computer system that has access to everything. Well, that's the global brain. And Salvaggio kind of describes it like this. These are his words. Think about the nearly countless amount of data feeds powered by IoT technologies and the constantly increasing amount of computing power being created to analyze that data in ways that were never even possible just 5 years ago. Yeah. Now imagine all of these systems of data feeds and computing power connected with each other in an ever increasingly complex system of systems. Now that is what the global brain, as it were, is. And it could be used for good or it could be used for not so good, says Gerd Leonard. In his video, which you can watch from down here, he talks about a lot of this. In that video you can watch in Salvaggio's article. Gerd says that a global brain raises ethical concerns because such a system becomes a global panopticon. Who controls it? Who has access to the data? If this sounds vaguely familiar, think of some of the questions that Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg faced before Congress the other day. It's like you have access to all this data. Who's in control? Who makes the decisions? What are you doing with it? Well, now imagine it's not just Facebook, it's the entire world is connected, and who's in control of the system? Who's watching it?
We can trust our governments.
Sure, of course, we can trust our governments. I'm sure they have our best interests in mind.
Yeah.
So Gerd asked the question, can technology get out of hand? Can it exceed our grasp? And that's, he has this idea, this panopticon, the kind of the all-seeing eye. You have this network that has one nexus, which is the system, but everybody is tied into it. And how, there's a lot of good that can be done with it. Think of the technological advances you could make with this. Think of, if everybody in the world is connected, think of what you could do with that for good, but also what you can do for evil. And he says something here that's really interesting. Related to that, this is a quote from Gerd. He says, civilizations are driven by their technology, but they are defined by their humanity. And that gets kind of to the whole crux of the issue. Technologies are always going to be there. We've talked about this before. We're going to continue to innovate. This idea of the global brain is not that far-fetched. The pieces of it are already in place. Sure. So what do you do with it? And that is why you have people who think about the ethical issues is, where does humanity step in to mitigate any of the negative consequences that come out of this kind of technology?
Yeah, and I like that. I mean, so again, powered by technology, but defined by humanity.
But defined by humanity.
And that is true. I think that's been true for every society that's ever existed on the planet. Was that, you can use what you know how to do. I mean, you think back, 3,000 or 4,000 years. I mean, when they first began to have iron.
Right.
Was it Bronze Age and then Iron Age?
Yeah.
I think. And societies that had access to those superior weapons were just dominant, right? I mean, you could take over huge chunks of your area, but it was the culture of like Rome, for instance. It was Rome's culture that really, and of course Rome's army, but I mean, that kind of two things go hand in hand. But it really was the culture of Rome that really made it a successful world culture and world civilization. So those things you need to have go hand in hand. So, are we at risk of having the technology get out of hand of our humanity? Well, not if we're aware of it, and not if there are ethicists, like you're saying, who are humanists that are looking at these things. Yeah, and there's a lot of those things. Cloning. I mean, there's a lot of these issues that are that are out there that we have to kind of
the whole CRISPR thing that's going along, the just modifying your DNA kind of on the fly. I mean,
where does that go?
Where does it go?
Yeah, right.